Hello and welcome to Hops and Bros. This week,
On this week, Craft Beer 101, we're pulling out one of our not oldest, but famous video we did about milkshake IPAs. We're diving a little bit deeper into the subject in this week's video, so...
the Milkshake IPA. So, it's 102, guys.
For an open window on the craft beer world, Max and Chris from Ups and Ups and Bros. Welcome to Ups and Bros. Yeah.
Alright, so this week we're trying something completely new in the sense that we've been talking about revisiting old 101s and doing 102s. So try to get a little more information on various subjects, especially for the ones that you guys have more questions about.
Alright, so this year, milkshake IPAs are back stronger than ever, and last year we were talking about it as a new style. Now it's just back as the style that we know from last year, and now we know a bit more breweries experimented with it, so that's why we want to do a Craft Beer 102 on it, and not just because I grew a bit more beard and Max lost his beard to exchange it for sweet hell mustache, but just because we want to dive a little bit more deeper into it, because we've added some knowledge to Ops and Bros at the same time, and we want to share that with you guys. So this is why Milkshake IPAs are doing a comeback on this week's Craft Beer 101, or should we call it 102.
Again, this year, Milkshake IPAs, I don't get why people are doing them in the summer. To me, the Milkshake IPA is a winter IPA because of the sweetness. There's a little more sweet, a little more mouthfeel to it. As in the summer, you want something I find a little lighter, like a Session or a Saison, Grisette, something a little bit more thirst quenching and thirst getting, as a sweet beer will have that pasty mouthfeel that is, I guess, a little easier to take in the winter, I find.
I'm not sure if I'm the one to blame, but I'm just not a big fan of milkshake IPAs. And I know it might look really weird because yesterday when I kind of like fucked up footage, I was drinking this, and now I'm drinking the Milkshake New England IPA from Buckell, which is the one we had last year, but this time in a canned version of it. So seriously, again, this one is one of my favorites because it's not too sweet and not too on the milkshake side, more on the New England style of IPA, which kind of like keeps it more on the beer side of things, in my opinion.
Now, we already talked about the Milkshake IPA in the past, so we won't go through the history. Go check out the 101 if you want that. We won't go through the large lines of what's in it, because at this point you should have probably watched the other video. We might touch a little bit here and there. The big particularity of this beer is that with the Milkshake IPA you have lactose added and vanilla, usually the two ingredients, sometimes fruit as well, to make it a little more like a milkshake. So to dive in a little more, let's see why they're adding lactose to it. Because in practice, what does lactose do in beer? Why would you add it? There doesn't seem to be a reason, considering that the beer is already technically sweet. There's already sugars in there. So we're going to talk about the fermentation yeast. So yeast will eat sugars, create alcohol and CO2, the two things that they are. Now, how do you get sugar in the wort? It's very easy. It's the malt that you're using. There's going to be a couple different kinds of sugar that are going to be both fermentable and non-fermentable. So the job of the brewer isn't really to technically create the beer or make the beer. It's to make the wort, and then the yeast is going to act and create the beer that we drink in our glasses. To do so, we add malt first in the wort, and by adding different kinds of malt, you're going to get different concepts. And also, if you play with the heat in the mash, you're going to activate different amylase. Yeah, it's a protein. It's a I've got the word. I can't remember how to pronounce it. Amylases? Anyways, amylase? Amylase, let's go with amylase. There's a beta and alphas that are going to be active at different times in your boil and are going to be good at breaking down different kinds of sugars, because you do have your two base sugars, which is glucose and fructose. And keep in mind, when you're drinking something sweet, humans naturally are inclined to like sweetness because it means nutrition and it means something good. And the sweeter it is, the easier your body will be able to break it down. Your two base sugars, glucose and fructose. Fructose fructose is a little easier to digest than glucose, so it will be perceived as being a little sweeter. That's like most fruits are very sweet. That's one of the reasons why, because it's something that is easy for us to digest. With those two base sugars, you will be creating a bunch of different sugars. You've got sucrose, maltose, maltriose, maltodextrin. There's a lot of different sugars happening, and all of those have a different way of being consumed. Now that's where your beta and alpha amylase are going to be able to break those sugars down to a point where you will be able to perceive it, but your yeast is also going to be able to break it down and create the alcohol, create the esters, create the CO2 in the fermentation. So, yeah, please. In most cases, yes, but there's going to be sugars that are deemed as non-fermentable. But if you have sugars that are non-fermentable in your wort, what you're actually creating is a harder time for your yeast to work. So you're going to create some off flavors in your fermentation. That's why we usually mash in at a certain degree where your beta and alpha amylase are going to be able to work easily and break down as many sugars so that you can create the ideal level of alcohol and CO2 and sweetness and all that stuff in your beer. Now that's where the lactose comes in. Lactose is a non-fermentable sugar. So by adding this to the Milkshake IPA, you can maximize your sugar in outtake from your malts and still have that mouthfeel and that sweetness in your end product, which is the Milkshake IPA. So that's where the lactose. No, because you're breaking down all the sugars you need from the malts, and then you're adding an extra non-fermentable sugar that the yeast can't consume, but you will be able to. So you will perceive that sweetness, you will have that mouthfeel, and you're not going to affect the level of alcohol in your beer. You're not going to affect your yeast in any way, really, because it's just going to ignore that sugar, at least for the most part. Yes, and I'm actually keeping it simple. It's a little more complex than this. There's a little more at play, and there's a third protein, a third enzyme, if you will, that also breaks down sugars in different ways. And the ways that your alphas and betas are going to break down sugar is completely different, and they're going to create, again, different kinds of sugars, different kinds of sugar strains that is going to be either easy for your yeast to consume or not so easy. But anyways, that's it for the malt aspect and why there's lactose in there, and the vanilla is really just to make it taste like a milkshake.
So yes, what's interesting too at the same time is that brewers started learning and experimenting more with the milkshake style. So by removing vanilla and replacing it, for example, with the Los Tabarnacos, you have coconut instead of vanilla to create that kind of like nice little sweetness in the back. But some breweries replace
no lactose, or no
classic fruits in milkshake IPAs with just a New England style IPA in there to get that nice fruitiness out of it, because fruit adds pectin to your milkshake IPA, and this will create clogginess in your beer, which is not something you really want because it's not something that looks nice. It's not really appealing to the consumer when he gets those nice big clogs of proteins stick together in the glass. So that's why a good way to use it, and I know Max will go a little bit more deeper into the way yeast is consuming the sugars in the beer, but I guess that playing with fruit is another challenge, and also you lose the head, and that's one thing that I do really hate in the beer making process. You need a nice head on top. That's my personal preference on this one.
Yeah, it's also going to kill your foam. Like there's a certain certain things, different styles have different standards, but as soon as you put fruit in beer, usually it's very hard to maintain that nice head on your beer. And we're gonna talk about head on another video for sure, because foam is super important in beer culture in general. And it's something that North America kind of lost. But it did make it so that we could accept different things like cloudy beers, beers with no head, fruity beers that maybe in Europe are not styles that are as common.
Alright, so you did enjoy those nice craft beer 101s and you want to support the whole show and support the knowledge or all the effort we put in there, then buy us a beer on Patreon. This is the best way to support the show. For $5, you buy us a beer and you can write down in the comments whatever beer you want us to review next or whatever subject you want us to cover, which is a kind of hop, malts, yeast, even water if you'd like. But of course, by subscribing to the YouTube channel, you do get a notification every single time a video goes out.
So if you like the video, please leave a like, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and let us know in the comments below which 101 you would like to see in the future. I saw that.